Please tell us your name, where you were born, and where you grew up.
I'm Joe Lonergan. I was born in Quebec City, February 25th, 1947. I'm a boomer. I grew up in Quebec City.
And how would you explain Quebec City's Irish history to someone unfamiliar with it?
Well, I would say the presence of the odd Irish immigrant prior to the conquest is pretty insignificant. Even after the conquest, up till about 1800, that's when they. Previous to that, there was a trickle. After 1800, there was more of a significant arrival, and it kept increasing until it was virtually a flood in the 1840s. I'd say the push, uh, I'm just talking from history because my own first ancestors to arrive here would have been in the 1820s, but there were Irish people here before that, and I'd say what probably pushed them out was the aftermath of the rebellion in 1798, and
The rebellion
which
in Ireland.
in Ireland, yeah, which sputtered on till about 1803, and then I'd say well, some of the Irish would have been demobilized soldiers in the British Army after the Napoleonic Wars wound up. Then, well, continued problems in Ireland like the Tithe War, and finally there was emancipation for the Catholics, but at the same time they had the Disenfranchisement Acts, and they reduced the voting population by 20%, by 80%, took it down to 20% of what it was. So it wasn't very encouraging to stay. There was still a lot of hatred and oppression. And then, of course, the famines put the tin hat on it. They came in great numbers in.
And what made Quebec City kind of a like what made Quebec City different as a place of Irish as a place for the Irish to settle than other places in North America? How was it different here?
Well, it was different in the sense that the fare from Ireland to Quebec was comparatively cheaper than it would have been to go to the United States because Quebec was also part of the British Empire. So you weren't really leaving jurisdictions. And Quebec was a port city, so a lot of them got off here. A lot of them continued on from Quebec City to points west, but some of them stayed here, at least for a generation.
And where did the people of Irish descent and the Irish live in the city?
Uh, well, they landed down on the riverfront of the St. Lawrence, and a lot of them settled there. They settled along Champlain Street, and they occupied cove after cove after cove, going west as far as Silwy, eventually as far as Cap Rouge. And some of them made it up to the plateau. There was a little village where my people settled, Mount Pleasant Village, which it was beyond the city limits at that time, but the city limits was de Salaberry Street. So Mount Pleasant was just about 2 blocks beyond that. Eventually, some of them made a little money and moved up from Champlain Street, and they moved into St. John the Baptist Parish, or some people used to call it the Quartier Irlandais, streets like St. Patrick Street, O'Connell Street, St. Julia, St. Michael, Artillery Street. Actually, they took those, some of them took Irish names after the Irish started populating the streets.
And there was City, right? City.
Sylvie, oh yeah. They, as I say, they went out from cove to cove, and they got the Sillery. Then they went up into on the plateau in Sillery and Bergerville. There was effectively that St. Columban de Sillery was an Irish parish, I would say. It was there was a good-sized French-Canadian population, but they were outnumbered by the Irish until gradually, as time went on, the French Canadians outnumbered the Irish there.
What associations and organizations did Irish Catholics create in Quebec City, and particularly, like, which ones were your ancestors involved in?
Um, there was an immigrant society, which wasn't only Irish. There was a St. Patrick's Society, which previous to the 1850s, which was non-sectarian. Both Protestants and Catholics were members. After the famine, there were the St. Patrick's Literary and Historical Society. That was very popular. They used to organize their St. Patrick's Day celebrations, their soirees, and they'd be involved in the parade too. Politically, there would have been chapters of the Land League in Quebec, eventually the National League. Underground, there would have been circles of the Irish Republican Brotherhood, what they referred to as Fenians over here. There were many groups that would come and go. There was the Hibernian Benevolent Association, which actually I think was a front for the IRB. There was the Ancient Order of Hibernians eventually. There was, of course, there was St. Patrick's Parish,
Right.
An institution.
How would you say the Irish experience differed between Quebec City and Montreal back then, and also, I guess, today as well?
Well, back then, I would say that I suspect the percentage of Irish in Quebec City was greater than that of Montreal. The numbers were probably less, but the percentage was probably greater in Quebec. From about 1830 up to 1871, it was pretty well a steady 20% Irish. And that was strong. The difference in Montreal and I'd say how that illustrated itself was that by the time you get into the late 1870s, there's serious violence in Montreal, riots and fights between the orange and the green, which didn't really occur in Quebec City. And I'd say it was because the Irish Catholic element was too strong. There was no sense picking a fight with somebody that you couldn't beat.
Right. So, do you think there was more nationalism here? There was more kind of Irish?
It's difficult for me to speak for Montreal, but I think, yeah, there was a lot of Irish nationalism here. I'm aware there was Irish nationalism in Montreal too. I mean, there were Fenian circles both in Quebec City and Montreal.
And what about your own ancestors? Do you know anything about your own ancestors' involvement in the 19th century in some of these organizations?
My grandfather, Dick Timmins, was very involved with the St. Patrick's Literary Society, putting on the plays, and I know they would have been involved in, at the very least, subscribing and maybe collecting money for the Land League or the National League.
So we're going to go back to your childhood. In your memoir, The Shamrock and the Maples, which maybe you can show,
Mm-hmm.
You've said you grew up in the mid 20th century as a poor Irish Catholic in what is now Montcalm, which was mainly a very kind of middle class neighborhood with a lot of with a big British Protestant population. So, what was the neighborhood like? What was it like growing up as an Irish Catholic from a sort of more working class background in that neighborhood?
It was a great neighborhood to grow up in because we were. It was on Mountain Avenue, close to the Plains of Abraham. It was a great place to stay. But yes, from Fraser Street up to Grand Allée, it was largely English speaking, and most of the people were English Protestants, and there was a couple of Jewish families, and we were, I'd say, like I mentioned in the book, on the Queen's birthday, the Union Jacks would all come out, but it was conspicuously absent on our house. But there was no animosity between me and my friends over that. It was just, we were great friends, had a great time.
So, how did the linguistic and religious groups interact, like Francophones, English and Irish, and the Protestants?
It was mostly English speaking in our street,
Yeah.
but up a little street, a little cul-de-sac that comes down to my street, there were kids that we considered French up the street. I later realized some of them had Irish mothers, but they were French speaking. We'd go up and we'd trade insults, calling them pea soup and them calling us pâte à poêle and throwing rocks at each other and
So the Irish Catholics would get along better with the Protestants, with the English speaking Protestants, than with the
well, that was me because I was one Irish Catholic and a bunch of among about 5 or 6 Irish English Protestants. So strategically it was a good move to be friendly.
How has the neighborhood changed over the years? And when did it start changing?
Oh boy, I guess that's a good question. I'd say around 1958, 59, 60, old families that I recall, they just started moving out. And whenever an English-speaking family would move out, the French-speaking family would move in. And gradually the street became...
Were they moving out of the city, moving out of the province, or just moving to the suburbs?
I'd say they were moving out of the province.
Right.
Yeah. I completely lost track of them,
Yeah.
They disappeared.
We're going to talk a bit about Irish Heritage Quebec. How did the Irish Heritage come about?
Irish Heritage Quebec was founded in 1973 by Mariano O'Gallagher. I was away at the time studying. I only became aware of Irish Heritage Quebec probably around 1977, 78, after I'd been back a couple of years. One day I realized I went to could have been a fall fest or something, and saw, what's this outfit? So I was in the dark as to its existence. But as I understand it, other people with Mariano, like Yolanda O'Neill and Harry Hannon and Larkin Kerwin, probably would have had a hand in it. Original organizers, or members, certainly.
And what were their activities in the 70s and the early years? 70s and 80s.
They were gathering documents, mostly. They were trying to gather documents from Irish families in Quebec City who were getting rid of their stuff. I know Mariana was prescient enough that when they closed down the monastery at St. Patrick's rectory that used to be on Grand Allée, they had a big library, and it was full of a lot of Irish books that they'd gotten from a guy in the late 19th century, Felix Carberry. He was a hibernophile, He had all kinds of books in English and Irish and other Celtic languages, actually. And they were getting rid of them. So Mariana took them, and they did that kind of thing.
So there was a lot of archive gathering, and one of the sort of monthly, or you have like regular lectures nowadays. When did that start?
I suppose around in the 1980s, they had the occasional lecture. It's hard for me to be exact because I wasn't actually a member till about 2001.
Okay.
I was busy with teaching and raising my kids and other things that kept me out of Irish Heritage Quebec. And finally, when I joined up, eventually, I wasn't very active until I retired in 2006, and then I started attending, and then I became president, and the idea of having lectures became more and more regular, monthly.
So how would you describe sort of your, Mariana had her perspective, and she sort of, she did a lot of work with the Go Sid Memorial Project in the 80s and 90s. How would you describe her influence, and how do your perspective and approaches to running Irish Heritage differ?
Mariana was much more broad-minded than me. She concerned herself more with the English-speaking community as a whole than I did, than I would when I became president. She was involved. I remember her starting to catalog English-speaking soldiers, British soldiers who had served in Quebec City, and I had no interest in that myself. And she was interested in the Scots and the English, not only the Irish, but of course her main focus was on the Irish. And she was heavily concerned with Gros Seal and setting up that as an Irish site. And of course, she was involved with big projects like the Irish Summer in 1997. And of course, publishing her books on Gros Seal, or helping other people publish a book like Brother Mangan's book on the voyage of the Naparima, Nancy Schmidt's book on Irish for a Day. So I haven't really been involved in. Well, I published my own books, but that was a personal affair.
You brought it back to sort of Ireland and kind of.
Yeah. But Mariana was concerned more with than I was with the English-speaking community. But of course, Irish Heritage Quebec for her was Irish Heritage. I'm just saying she had more irons in the fire than I did.
Okay. In promoting Irish heritage in Quebec, what have your experiences been with Francophones, other English speakers, and people of Irish origin in general, different groups in the city? Who comes to the meetings?
Most of the people who come to the meeting have some kind of an Irish connection, but not necessarily.
But I mean, a lot of Francophones have Irish connections too.
Yeah.
Is it mostly in English language? Do things take place mostly in English?
Our lectures are almost always in English. We have had one in French. We're going to have another one in. Well, it's hard to say whether it's going to be in French or in English. We've had some bilingual activities. Certainly no friction with French organizations. We've always got along very well. And other people, yeah, English people, Scots. I'm sure some of them have come to occasionally to some of our lectures too. You know, presentations, I guess I should call them.
Um, in the last few decades, there's been the revival of the St. Patrick's Day Parade, which had stopped, right, at some point. I don't know what year it stopped in, but it was revived.
Yeah.
Maybe you could tell us a bit about that and how that came about and what role Irish Heritage played and perhaps what role you played as well.
Mm-hmm. It stopped around 1926, although the St. Patrick's Cadet Corps often would march, you know, but that would be a much smaller affair than the big parades. In 2009, a guy by the name of Peter Farrell, an Irishman from Sligo, he took into his head to resuscitate the parade. I don't know why he took on that project. He was in contact with Mariana, and Mariana encouraged him to do it sooner than later, because I think poor Mariana at the time realized that she was sick, and in fact she died later in the year. The first, you know, she was the Grand Marshal at the first, but she died later that year. She was the Grand Marshal in March, and I believe she died in May. Right. I was involved, and by that time I was the president of Irish Heritage Quebec, because Mariana had resigned the previous fall. And I was in touch, I knew Peter Farrell, and I was in touch with him.
Who is Peter Farrell?
Pardon?
Who is Peter Farrell? What was he involved with?
He was an Irish immigrant from Sligo. You know, he owned a bar, an Elegance bar.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, it used to be on top of Joe DeLille's Tavern on St. John Street.
Still there, right?
No, it's moved to St. Genevieve Street. And
but he's still around, right? He's still.
Peter's, I don't know where he is now. Okay. He's not in Quebec City.
Oh, he's not. Right.
But he could be in the province, but he's not in Quebec City. Okay. And yeah, in fact, I think my son might have worked there, might have played a. Yeah, that would have been, he would have been entertaining, and I knew of Peter's existence before I actually met him. But then when he got involved with the parade, we met, and because I'd give him an idea of the layout of Quebec City, much like our conversation now, to give him some idea to who to see, who to ask, support, yeah, like that.
So you helped him make the connections, really, to get the parade.
Yeah, and he came. I recall him coming to see us at a meeting, right? A board meeting of Irish Heritage Quebec. You know, talk about the parade. You know.
And who's running the parade now? Is Irish Heritage involved in any?
No. Irish Heritage Quebec and what they call the Défilé de la Saint-Patrick are two completely different organizations. We're not connected, but we always marched. We've always marched in the parade. Right. You know?
So next question is about institutional changes in the city. So, you know, you've mentioned that Irish Catholics in Quebec used to have very distinct institutions, and many have either disappeared over the years or relocated to smaller buildings, merged. In the case of Champlain, St. Lawrence, which was very Irish at first, kind of the Irish identity was sort of, you know, saw that flavor diminish, perhaps. And there was once a rivalry between St. Patrick's High School and Quebec High School. You know, St. Patrick's, which was the Catholic school, Quebec High School, which was the Protestant school. Mm-hmm. And some saw the rivalry as friendly, others as problematic. And now the school board is merging the two schools, right, creating this kind of single English language one, partly in the name of greater social cohesion and so on. Do you see that, you know, there is an erosion of this kind of Irishness in Quebec? Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on this? What are your feelings about this?
Well, going back to the rivalry between Quebec High and St. Pat's, over football. It's definitely a rivalry there, but I think it was all in good fun. There wasn't any deep hatred, It was just rivalry, two different traditions, and I think, of course, I'm an old guy. I'm 78, and I went to St. Pat's myself as a kid, and I taught at St. Pat's for throughout my career. So it hurts to think that the building is going to be not used anymore as St. Patrick's School, and I don't know what's going to happen to it. And I'm sure there's old boys from Quebec High who would have some of the same feelings, But I can appreciate younger people feeling that, oh yeah, well, that's old stuff, and we got to get this super school going, and that's okay. But nevertheless, it hurts.
Mhm. But do you feel that sort of the Irish flavor of Quebec City is kind of disappearing? Is that a problem, or do you think it's
It's certainly not like it was in the 1800s when we were 20% of
right?
the population. Um, yeah, I'd say the Irish population has declined, but in the last 10 years, in a sense, 10, 15, 20 years, it's been a kind of a resuscitation of it all in the sense of the parade came back. Um, Despite the fact that they're going to amalgamate the two schools. St. Pat's is a very strong school. They have a strong sports program. St. Patrick's Parish, on the other hand, I'd say there's a marked decline there. In as an Irish parish, I still go to mass on Sunday, and there's more Filipinos there, I'd say, than anybody. Certainly more Filipinos than Irish. Probably maybe there's more Filipinos than anybody else, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I mean, it's the reality. Uh, um, I guess could have been. I guess it began after the Second World War. Uh, Maybe the Quiet Revolution would have speeded it up a bit. A lot of the children of Irish families would have gone on to Montreal and on to Toronto, and some of them stayed. And also, there's the idea too that a lot of my Irish marry French Canadians,
Sure.
and how that goes. It can go either way. You can have the Irish traditions predominate, or the French Canadian traditions predominate, or they're both there. Usually, it depends on who the mother is.
And all your ancestors are Irish, right?
Yeah, that's that's it. I'm a case of Irish marrying Irish all the way down to me, but then I've married a French Canadian. But my kids are pretty aware of
Yeah.
both traditions.
And how do you feel like, in Irish Heritage Quebec, the people you come across, some of the people who are members of Irish Heritage, where do they stand with regard to this kind of the changes that are going on in the institutions disappearing and so on?
Uh, I don't hear any complaints
Right.
really, or whining, or they're just living the times, and they they have a connection to an Irish background, and they're interested in hearing about it.
Okay, so they're just accepting it as change.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, let's talk about the plaque. So we're going back in history during the 7 Years' War and the Battle of the Plains of Abraham. This in 1759, the Scottish 78th Fraser Highlanders fought with the British under General Wolfe and against the French. And 250 years later, in 2009, a commemorative 78th Highlanders Regiment, Fraser Highlanders Regiment, put up a plaque honoring them on St. Patrick's High School. It said that the Highlanders had died for king and country. When did you first see this plaque? How did you come to know of it? What was your initial reaction? And I know there was, then we could talk about the rest.
It it went up around the 13th of September in 2009, and I was unaware it went up. Irish Heritage was Quebec was unaware. The whole parish was unaware. Uh, I only noticed it around middle of October. I was walking down Fraser, and I said street, and I was there. What the heck is that? And the strange thing about it is the night it was the night before it was unveiled. I walked down that street. It was covered up. It was behind scaffolding. It was the night of the Moulin de la Parole, and I was unaware it was there. If I'd been concentrated on the school more and peeked behind the canvas and seen it, I don't know if there ever would have been a controversy after that, frankly. But I only saw it about a month later, and then we started moving and complaining. And long story short, I'm happy to say that about 2.5, 3 weeks ago, it was taken down.
Right. So, what arguments did Irish Heritage Quebec present to the school board and others about the plaque? What was the argument against it?
Well, we said we didn't think it was appropriate to be put on St. Patrick's School on a site that had been identified with an Irish Catholic parish since 1856, and with the Irish Catholics since 1832, because it used to be St. Louis Cemetery. And it was opened in 1832 during the cholera epidemic, and was a Catholic cemetery, and all kinds of French Canadian and Irish cholera victims were buried there. And the front section was just a cemetery. Whether you had cholera or not, you could be buried there. And eventually St. Pat's bought half of it and became St. Patrick's Cemetery. Then they bought the other half. It served as our cemetery up to 1879. Then, of course, the whole block was a cemetery, but then as they stopped using it as a cemetery, eventually the parish allowed St. Patrick's School to move up from St. McMahon Street and build the building on which the plaque would be affixed. Also on the block, of course, was St. Bridget's home. And eventually St. Patrick's Church moved up to St. McMahon and McMahon Street in 1915. So the whole block was identified pretty well with St. Patrick's Parish. So we felt it was inappropriate to have the plaque put up, and we suggested that they put it elsewhere. And eventually, 15 years later.
So who collaborated with you on this? Because I believe there's some of the other historical.
Oh yeah, we got letters of support from certainly the United Irish Societies in Montreal, and Quebec Historical Society in Quebec City, Saint Foy, I believe, as well. And
I believe there were some arguments about it being not really even the site where the Fraser Highlanders had stood, right? That was one of the...
yeah, well, that's questionable, I personally, I think it's a bit much to have it where it was, because my perception was that was probably where the French received the volley that broke their ranks, and any Frasers that would have been there would have broke ranks and been probably dispatching wounded Frenchmen are chasing them back to Quebec City or to the Saint-Geneviève-Couteau, where, of course, the French militia opened up on them.
What reaction did you get from the Fraser Highlanders and from the school board initially?
Oh, they made out that, I'd say initially they were ignoring us, saying, well, what's the problem? It's, there must have been the odd Scottish kid went to St. Pat's, but that wasn't our point, And then they, if I recall, they came to the idea that, yeah, well, if we could find another place for it, because you see, the original problem, I would say, they would have liked to have it on the Plains of Abraham, but the National Battlefields Commission at the time, the personnel had said, no, we've done enough for the to commemorate the Battle of the Plains. Everything has been done up here, different regiments. We're not putting up another thing. So they looked around for the place and they came to an agreement to put it up on the St. Pat's School. And so they would have been happy if they could find another place to put it. There was talk of putting it on a building on the corner of Cartier Avenue and Fraser Street. Probably would have been more appropriate there, but it didn't turn out because I think the merchants on Cartier Avenue and eventually City Hall said they weren't in agreement, so it didn't happen. But yeah, they were ready to see that done. Of course, they would have wanted Irish Heritage Quebec to pay for removing the plaque and reinstalling for the plaque. I still have the documents where they set up a kind of a contract, It
So-
wasn't.
So what ended up happening in the end? Like, why did the plaque come down? What was the straw that broke the camel's back?
My understanding is that you have the happy situation now that the man in charge of the school commission is the same man who is in charge of the National Battlefields Commission. So it was easy to come to an agreement to take it off the school and move it up to the park somewhere where it's going to go. I don't know. So I thank Mr. Jean Roberge for that.
So now we're going to talk about Irish Republican activism. You talk, sorry, which you talk about in your memoir. You mentioned coming from a long line of Irish nationalists and described being raised as an Irish Republican. Could you share more about that and how it shaped you?
Well, I'd hear my father talking with his brothers, or if I'd ask a question, they always identified with, because this, of course, is looking backwards, they always identified with the struggle for Irish independence. And my father's father had too. And so when things, for example, my uncle used to come over to see my uncle. Sometimes he'd leave a copy of an Irish Republican newspaper. So by the time I was 13, I actually subscribed to the newspaper. It only cost $2 a year. And so I kept reading their stuff, and I could identify with it. Eventually, when the Troubles broke out in 1969, but I mean, actually, things were brewing before that. I raised little money to support Irish Republican prisoners, and went on from that. I had an uncle in Chicago who was heavily involved in raising money for the Republican movement and actually reconditioning equipment for them. And so, yeah, that's where I was. And then when I started teaching, that sort of explains the why I wasn't involved in Irish Heritage Quebec, really, until the ceasefire and
Why is that?
the Good Friday
What's the
Agreement,
link?
because I'd say it would have been a bit of an embarrassment to Mariana, because I would have been easily identified as somebody who was uh, certainly supporting the narrative, the Irish Republican narrative, you know. And a lot of people just saw that as, oh, well, you just don't go there, you know. They didn't want to talk about it.
Okay, well, that brings me to my next question, because in the 19th century in Quebec, the Fenians you mentioned earlier, historians Peter Toner and David Wilson argue that Quebec City was the major Fenian stronghold in Canada in the 19th century. So
Mm-hmm.
there was a very strong Irish, sentiment for Irish independence in the 19th century.
Mm-hmm.
But moving forward in time, how common was this when you were in the 70s, 80s? Were you sort of an outlier, or were there others like you? And how
I,
Republican is Quebec's Irish community, basically,
I
today?
I'd say I was an outlier, and if people had some sympathy, they kept it to themselves and very quiet.
Okay.
And I can understand that because the whole thing is complicated. I would say Irish republicanism and sympathy for that uh, probably greatly diminished in the 1920s. That's, by the way, when the parade
With the Civil War.
stopped. Yeah, it stopped around 1926. After the Civil War, anybody, Irish person over here, would have had a difficult time understanding why Irishmen are killing other Irishmen over over words in a treaty, and how much, you know, uh, whether the Free State or the Republic, kind of moot points if you live thousands of miles away.
But then with the Troubles, I mean, did that reignite something or not?
Uh, I would say not among the Irish of Quebec City. It did a bit with me, but not not much beyond that.
Okay. Um, Tell us about your role in creating the Quebec Ireland Committee during the 60s and the 90s and the period, the Troubles period.
Well,
What activities did you undertake? What impact did you have?
like I say, I followed the armed struggle in the north of Ireland very closely, and which began in earnest, I guess, around 1970, 71, 72, 73. 1981, when the hunger strike started, uh, I tried on my own to get I tried to get a private member's bill through the Assemblée Nationale in support of the hunger strikers, and then it didn't go through. Then in May of that was in 1980.
But you had support from the PQ, I believe, with that bill, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I did from what's his name? Garra. I'm losing names now, but his mother was Irish. She was a Slattery. Yeah, but it didn't go through. That was in December of 1980. But then in May of 1981, after his hunger strike, Bobby Sands died, and I'd I'd already gone up to Montreal and met. I guess it was after Bobby Sands died. We formed a committee.
Yeah.
I heard there was a demonstration. The CSN had a bit of a demonstration, so I went down to try and see who was there. Anyway, I got in touch with a guy, a CSN man, Patrick Sims. He was people would have been from Silvery, St. Malachy. And I was unaware of him, but we made friends, and we organized the Quebec Ireland Committee.
And what did you do? What did the committee do?
What we do is, we certainly didn't raise money for the IRA. What we tried to do is present the Irish Republican narrative, and as to their explanation why there was violence and why the British should
And you
British
do
Army
events-
should get out of
you
Northern
do sort of
Ireland.
presentations in Quebec City and Montreal? Or?
There was a Quebec Ireland Committee in Montreal too. We were in contact with each other, but it wasn't like one took orders from the other. You know, we were two different. We had the same name, but effectively we were different.
Okay. And how are you different?
We were just independent,
Right.
but we'd be in touch with each other. They might advise us of a speaker was coming over, and they might even organize. We might organize to have them come down, but we did our own thing.
Okay.
You know.
And did you have any links with people like David Fenario or Kevin Callahan who were involved with?
Yeah, I don't remember. I remember hearing of David Fenario, but if I met him, I don't recall. I certainly remember Kevin Callahan because
Who was involved in Montreal? With
he was in Montreal, you know, and I remember him coming down with George Barrio, and they slept at our place,
Right.
my place, and because our committee and their committee, we wanted to meet each other and discuss things. You know.
And who were some of the speakers that came? Some of the big ones.
Father Des Wilson.
Okay. Who's he?
He was a kind of a worker priest in Belfast, and he organized different people's workers cooperatives in Belfast, and he ended up in Ballymurphy. I went to see him later on in Belfast, and he was a good man. I mean, he was a priest. I mean, it wasn't so much that he wasn't a violent man. It's just he kept saying to his own hierarchy, well, give us an alternative, you know. And because he wasn't really, he was a bit somewhat on the outs with the hierarchy.
Right.
Understandably. And some of the other speakers, was Naomi Brennan. I think she was with the Irish Republican Socialist Party. Their armed wing would have been the Irish National Liberation Army. And Sheila Dara. She would have been Cumanaban, I guess, with the IRA. Hard to remember.
There were a lot of connections between movements in Quebec, and there were some connections between Quebec and Ireland. And I'm giving the example like Paul Rose of the Front, formerly of the Front de Libération Nationale du Québec, went on a hunger strike in solidarity with Bobby Sands. How did you feel about Quebec independence then, and some of the and how do you see it? Well, then were you did you see it as a shared kind of struggle, or did you see any parallels between Quebec and Ireland? Or
I remember going to Montreal, and it's been a while,
Yeah.
But I do remember going to Montreal, and I remember meeting Paul Rose's sister. And we were just talking like that. Yeah, I mean, there was some mutual identification of being involved in a.
So were you involved with any sort of Quebec independence activity, or?
No,
No?
not really. No, I can't say that. But I mean,
I'm not radical necessarily, just sort of supportive of Quebec independence, or You don't need to go there if you don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, yeah. No, personally, I in the final analysis, I didn't think that the independence of Quebec, for the sake of Quebec, was a good idea because I was afraid that Canadian sections would be swallowed up piecemeal by the United States in the end. But I could identify with their desire for national independence, and my feeling was that I wouldn't be a person who would stand in their way if that was their democratic choice.
Okay. Um, how would you? What would you like to see more of in Quebec's history education with regard to the Irish?
Um,
You were a history teacher for a while.
I retired in 2006, and I'm too far out of the system to know what's taught now. And what was taught then, I felt was adequate, particularly if it had a sympathetic teacher. So what's in the curriculum and how it's presented and delivered depends a lot on the medium. The teacher who does it.
And did you bring a lot of Ireland or Irish heritage into your teaching at St. Pat's?
Uh, a little bit, but not a heck of a lot. I'd say indirectly in organizing the St. Patrick's Day shows at the school, and certainly there's probably not there wouldn't be a St. Patrick's show that went by without a rebel song in it, Mm-hmm.
You spent 35 years working at St. Patrick's High School, and you were also a student there. What roles did you hold in your time in school? So, aside from being a history teacher,
Yeah.
what did you do over this 35
Well,
years?
over
And what did those experiences mean to you?
Yeah, over 35 years, you end up teaching a lot of things. I taught history and geography, introduction to technology, career choice education, religion. Um, I, I functioned all those years as simply as a teacher, probably some years a homeroom teacher. I was department head for 1 year, but I didn't hold on to the position. I mean, that was my philosophy, was that the position of department head should revolve
Mm-hmm.
among members of the department. Other members of the department didn't feel that way. Once they got the position, they'd want to hold on to it. But
How would you describe St. Patrick's High School? What made it special for you and for the community? And how did it change over the years?
uh, well, as I said, I went to grades 1 and 2 at St. Bridget's Home, which was on the block. Then grade 3, I started going to St. Patrick's Elementary School, uh, which went, right up to grade 11 at the time. I shouldn't say elementary. It was just St. Patrick's School, and then they built the high school. Then they joined the two buildings, and I was always there from grade 3 on till when I graduated. Then I went to St. Lawrence College, but eventually, then I got my teaching degree at St. Mary's and then back at St. Patrick's teaching. So it was always part of my life. And on the same block, of course, every week I'd be going to St. Patrick's Church to Mass on Sunday. And so it was all there.
Yeah.
The community was centered on that block.
And how would if you're describing it, how was it different from, going to a French school or going to Quebec High, for instance? Like, what made it different, special?
Well, it was different than the French schools in that The French schools, I would say, like Saint-Dominique or Saint-Martyr, it would be kids from the neighborhood would go. St. Patrick's School was, I'm using the term, but some would say, well, that's a misnomer if I'd say call it a national school. Kids with Irish parents would come from all over the city to go to St. Pat's. They'd be coming in, some would be bussed in from Shannon, some kids would come in from St. Malachy, some from Lotbinière, they'd come in from St. Foy, Silbury, all over the place. So it was different in that way. Of course, there were more Irish locals too around St. Pat's itself, whereas there's very few now. And so it was different in that sense. It wouldn't have been different in that respect to Quebec High, because Quebec High would have been the same kind of thing. You know, kids would have come in all over as long as they weren't Catholic, I suppose. You know, because the Protestant kids were going there, the Greek Orthodox kids were going there, the Jewish kids were going there, and how else was it different? Well, it was different in that it was a block. Like Quebec High was Quebec High School. Their elementary school was elsewhere. It was on Fraser Street, St. George's School at the time. And where did old Protestants go? Well, they went to the old ladies' Protestant home. The men, I guess, went down to the Finley home, and
So the Protestant institutions were scattered.
yeah, it was geographically scattered. The Irish were sort of centered on that block between Randelais and Maisonneuve, de Salaberry, and what used to be De La Tour. Now it's Saint Laurent.
How are we doing for time?
2 minutes, and we are at 1 hour.
At 1 hour. Okay.
15 more
58 minutes.
Are there any other stories or events you'd like to share from your time with Irish Heritage Quebec, St. Patrick's School, other institutions?
No, I could say that maybe it's a sign of an aging community, but a lot of my work with Irish Heritage Quebec is helping people with their genealogy, because they're curious if there's gaps in their family records. They want to know when their grandfather, great grandfather arrived, and where did he come from? You know, from where in Ireland, which county, and sometimes we can help them, sometimes we can't.
Okay, I think that covers my questions. Anita, do you have anything you'd like to ask?
Covered pretty
Yeah?
much, yeah.
Okay. I mean, I could talk to you for hours, but I.
Yeah.
Thank you very much
Okay.
for the time. Yeah.